Hi, and welcome to Settings Manager. This will be a quick guide on what it is, how it works, and how you can implement it yourself. Starting out, Settings Manager is a tool for organizing and controlling different settings for your Unity-based game or application. This includes options for both users and developers, while maintaining a fully modular form factor. Let's jump in. Getting started, let's import Settings Manager into your scene. You can create one yourself from components, but we've included a prefab that should contain everything you need to get started. After importing, go up to the Battle Phase tab and select Settings Manager, Add Settings Manager to Scene. You can see this has added a large UI to your scene. Feel free to edit this as you choose, but let's go through what we have right now. Also, if you don't have one already, go ahead and add an event system to your scene to use the UI canvas. You can see multiple slider options on the top left, a toggle on the top right, various dropdowns on the right-hand side, and a box for debugging on the bottom left. These settings are the forward-facing side of Settings Manager itself, and just have the default options available to it right now. Clicking on the Settings Manager prefab in our scene, you'll find a lot of options immediately available. Let's go through them vertically. First, we have the render pipeline. This adds or removes different support based on your pipeline, so make sure you've selected yours from the list. I'm personally using Universal Render Pipeline, so for that I will select Universal. Add New simply adds a new settings option to our list. Let's check on the first setting in the list, Auto Adjust. The first line contains the setting type, as well as navigation in the list order. Variable types can be toggle, dropdown, dynamic, slider, disabled, or input field. Many of these are self-explanatory, but dynamic simply means that the values will not be predetermined. Imagine screen resolution, where it is likely better to create those options at runtime rather than relying on a pre-existing list for each possible platform. Next, we have the basic options, name and description for the setting. If you enable Advanced menu, you'll get some additional options. Included in these are Requires a Restart and Hover Explanation. The restart option presently only supports Windows, and will prompt the user with an interaction box we will describe later. Hover Explanation shows hover text while mousing over the option in your scene's UI, so place whatever information you find important for the user to know in here. Other settings, like Master Quality immediately below, will have a Parse Type option. This is available in integer, float, and string options, and is used to receive variables from more ambiguous sources, such as dropdowns or text fields. Depending on what type of setting you're using, you will have different options available for your UI. Option fields are included, but allow for multiple component types, such as Unity's, TextMesh Pro's, and MitchSky's. These are supported out of the box, but can be added to by the user further down. Since you can select multiple, it's important to have a second inspector to drag that specific component into the slot rather than the entire game object. For toggles, the value is always either on or off, true or false. For more ambiguous types, including dropdown and dynamic, you can select real and user values separately, letting you keep the naming conventions for your settings while having a separate value display for the user if this helps with clarity. Next, we have platform default values. These, as the name implies, allow you to pick a default value for your setting depending on what platform you're running on, such as Windows, OS X, or anything else that's supported. Master Quality is an option available only for dropdowns. This allows you to batch change other settings when changing your Master Quality setting, if your dropdowns include all of the options used by the Master Quality setting. Now, let's head down to the Settings Manager dropdown. This first option here is the debug level, defaulting to general. This controls how much logging the Settings Manager will do between changes and effects. Next, we have plenty of references for UI elements inside of our scene. Each of these again allows for multiple component types, so you will have to drag in the exact component you would like instead of the game object. Hover Explanation is the text component used for the hover options we selected earlier. Apply and Discard Settings would be the buttons for prompting the users when leaving the settings menu before actually making any changes. Restart Accepted and Denied are buttons that pop up when the setting requires a restart, while Restart Panel is the game object for that pop-up. Open Menu Folder would be the button for opening the folder containing the INI file for those settings, in the event you want those to be readily available for the user. For saving, you can choose on a per-platform basis as to whether you want to save your settings to the player prefs or to an INI file. You can also select the file name, as well as the culture info, which decides things such as periods versus commas, marking the decimal point in a number, depending on what the user's language recognizes. Then, of course, you have the buttons for showing where this file is stored, deleting this file locally, and deleting the stored player prefs. Next up are the module settings. As mentioned earlier, each setting is managed through a distinct module or script that responds to any changes done to that setting. You can manually add or remove them, though you'll likely just use the auto-assign button, which finds and adds any modules in the scene. Each module can have different values for the settings that they're individually looking for, so you can build those settings with the Construct Settings from Modules button. As you can see, plenty of example modules are included, so let's take a look at them before diving in further. In the included prefab, all static modules are on the Modules game object, while dynamic ones are on the Dynamic Modules object. While some have multiple variables at the top, like audio and brightness, they all include a list of options where you can append different existing settings. This will notify each module to the changes of any of these variables. Let's put together a basic module to test out. Let's go and make a C# script named MyModule. We'll be using this for both an existing setting as well as creating our own. Once you've opened it up, make sure to change your inherited type from MonoBehavior to Settings Manager Option. It won't compile right away, so we'll need to implement two different events, one for listening to the settings changes and another for creating the settings itself. Depending on your IDE, these may autofill for you. If not, go ahead and type out public override string receive option. This event has two variables it needs. A settings menu input we'll call option, and the settings manager itself we'll just call manager. Then feel free to return null. This is the event that gets called every time a selected setting is changed. The second event is public override void transfer settings, which takes again the settings manager itself as a parameter. This is the event that's called when pressing construct settings from modules to create different settings. For now, let's leave this blank and head back to Unity. To keep everything organized, let's put our new module onto the same modules game object. After doing so, you'll see it has the same Add Option button as all the rest, allowing us to add any variable we'd like to listen to. For now, we'll leave this on just one and select Auto Adjust, heading back to our module script. Since we might be dealing with either different or incorrectly selected settings, our Receive Option event will start off with a switch statement, passing it the option's name. We'll have a case for Auto Adjust, and just to prove it works, we'll put a debug log here and just say MyModule: changed the auto adjust. In transfer settings, we will be generating the defaults for our setting. You can instead do this just manually through the inspector, but let's go through how you do it here as well. If a setting already exists, we don't want to create a brand new setting, so we'll be using manager.addCompare option and pass this a new settings menu input variable. Add some curly brackets and we can set any member we'd like to here. For the demo, we'll just be setting its name and type, being mySetting and toggle, respectively. Setting the type will have to be done settings menu input is type toggle. With that, we can head back to Unity and see how it works. Back on the settings manager itself, press the Auto Assign Scene Modules to automatically grab our new one. Now, if we press the Construct Settings from Modules button, you'll see we've appended a new setting at the bottom, a toggle named MySetting. Going back to our MyModule component, we can add a second option here for the newly created MySetting. We can even go back to our module script and add another case in the switch statement for MySetting, and just set the debug log to instead say changed MySetting. If we hit play, you'll see the debug logs happening immediately, with the settings being assigned at the beginning. If we hit the toggle for Adjust Performance, you'll see our debug log pop up every time. If we were to have a button for our new setting, the same would appear there. Now, let's move on to the input type modules. These handle receiving input from various component types, and you'll likely not have to worry about these. By default, it comes with modules for Unity's Default, MitchSkies, and TextMesh Pro. If you have your own component type you want to be using, feel free to go ahead and create your own compatible module for your type as an add-on for Settings Manager. Manager modules handle attaching listeners to the UI components used by the toggles or buttons in your scene, letting you avoid setting up specific settings on each component manually. You shouldn't have to do more than pressing Auto Assign if they are empty, or if you are creating an add-on for Settings Manager. Let's do a brief overview of the other components that we have. Settings Manager Close Open Menu toggles the menu with a button, being Escape by default. There's a second one of these as well, toggling specifically the debug log in the menu, being / by default. The console system handles all of the logging in your scene done by Settings Manager, appending it to a text field of your choice. Auto Performance is the system for automatically managing performance settings, and is wired in by default as the first setting, Auto Adjust. And there you go. That should be enough to get you started with Settings Manager. If you have any questions, feel free to ask for help on the Discord server or contact Luca Dooley via email. Thank you and enjoy.